It's day 523 of the Russian invasion. If you're Vladimir Putin, that's around 500 days too many. It was supposed to be a special military operation, short, incisive, and overwhelming. Instead, it's become a battle of attrition, long, grinding, and costly. When the war started, Ukraine was cautious and calculated. They picked their battles. They tried not to poke the Russian bear too much. But that's not the case anymore. Ukraine is taking the war into Russia. They're striking deep inside Russian territory, and they're not denying it anymore. In fact, they're claiming responsibility for this escalation. The latest was seen on Sunday. Ukraine deployed 3 drones to strike Moscow. One of the drones was shot down. The other 2 were disengaged by electronic warfare. But the drones did crash into an office building in the Russian capital. Take a look at this. On paper, the damage is not very much. One person is injured, some structural damage to the building, that's about it. But the psychological impact is huge. You see, Russians have largely been isolated from the war in Ukraine. They cannot eat McDonald's anymore, but their safety and security was never in question. Ukraine wants to change that. This was the 4th attempt to strike Moscow in 1 month. None of them was a military success. But maybe the goal is not military after all. Maybe the goal is to make Russian citizens feel vulnerable. If the people feel unsafe, they will put pressure on the government, even in Russia. And if the government is under pressure, maybe they will end the war. That is the assumption. In the past, Ukraine has distanced itself from such attacks. They would neither confirm nor deny their role. But this time, Zelensky chose a different path. Hours after the drone attack, he delivered one of his selfie statements. He said the war is coming to Russia.
Ukraine is getting stronger. Gradually, the war is returning to the territory of Russia, to its symbolic centers and military bases. And this is an inevitable, natural, and absolutely fair process.
It's a bold claim, also a dangerous one. If you strike inside Russian territory, you're inviting an escalation. You're giving Moscow an excuse to hit hard. The question is, what form will it take? Even nuclear weapons could be on the table. We are not the ones saying this, Russia is. Former President Dmitry Medvedev has sounded a warning. He is a close ally of Vladimir Putin. He's also the deputy chairperson of the Security Council in Russia. Just listen to his warning. This is what he said. Just imagine that the NATO-supported offensive turned out successful and they took away a part of our land. Then we would have to use the nuclear weapon. It's a straightforward warning. If Ukraine's counter-offensive succeeds, if Kiev manages to take Russian land, then Moscow could use nuclear weapons. That's what he's saying. Is this a serious threat or is it just bluster? I would say it's a mix of both. Talk of a nuclear attack will discourage Ukraine from attacking Russian land. Serious or not, it will scare Zelensky. As for the counter-offensive, things are still slow. Most of the fighting is happening in the northeast. Earlier today, 2 Russian missiles hit Zelensky's hometown. Around 2 people were killed. There was shelling in the city of Donetsk as well. It is held by Russian forces, this city, and they have blamed Ukraine for the latest assault. Looks like we are entering a new phase of this war. Ukraine is plotting attacks inside Russia. Meanwhile, Putin is mobilizing more resources. He has increased the maximum age for conscription. Until now, men up to the age of 27 had to do compulsory military service in Russia. Now it's up to 30 years. So more manpower will be available to the Russian military. Putin has also commissioned more warships. He was in St. Petersburg on Sunday for Russia's Navy Day. He reviewed a parade of warships and submarines. Afterwards, he said the Navy would get 30 new ships in 2023, 30 new ships this year. And this is very important. The West claims Russia's military-industrial base is failing. And if that is the case, how can they produce 30 ships in 1 year? One side is clearly lying. The question is which one? Things are clearly not going to plan for Russia. There is no denying that, but Putin has not been reduced to an international pariah. He's not a Kim Jong-un yet. This weekend, he hosted African leaders for a summit. Around 20 of them turned up in St. Petersburg. The turnout was less than the last summit, but it's not pariah levels. Putin repeated his usual claims during the summit. He blamed the West for waging a hybrid war on Russia.
We believe the problem did not arise yesterday. It was provoked by certain forces in the West who for years have been preparing a hybrid war with our country, doing everything to turn Ukraine into a tool to undermine the basis of Russia's security, to damage Russia's position in the world, and to undermine our statehood.
So what happens next? Zelensky's comments betray his intentions. He wants to take the war to Russia, to strike deep inside Russian territory. We can debate why he wants to do that. Maybe it's to increase the public pressure on Putin, or maybe he senses that Russia is weak now. But an even more important question is this: does NATO support his intentions? The United States has publicly opposed attacks inside Russian territory. They say stick to defense. Don't poke the Russians unnecessarily. And to some extent, Ukraine respected that. They never claimed responsibility for the attacks on Moscow or the sabotage incidents near the border. So what has changed now? Has Washington allowed Ukraine to take the war to Russia, or is Zelensky going rogue? There was clearly a stalemate developing towards the end of last month. Neither side was making any progress. Such statements often break for two reasons. Such stalemates, rather, break for two reasons: for escalation or for peace talks. So either one of these things is happening. We're seeing the makings of an escalation from both sides. But there are peace talks too. What's more, it's coming from an unlikely place. Now to Pakistan. It's making news for a suicide blast. More than 45 people have been killed, 200 others have been injured. It happened at a political rally. The organizers are a party called JUIF, the Jamaat Ulema-e-Islam Fazl. They're allies of Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's party. They conducted a rally in the Bajaur district in northwest Pakistan. The Islamic State has now claimed responsibility for this attack. And this isn't the first time that they've targeted this party. Pakistanis now fear more such attacks. It is election season in the country, and that usually means more violence and volatility. Our next report tells you more.
It was just another day for Pakistan. The country is heading to polls soon, and political parties are gearing up. In the country's northwest, the Jamiat Ulema-e-Islam Fazl was holding a meeting. Hundreds turned up for this. It was a way for the Islamist JUIF to rally its support, especially ahead of the elections later this year. So it was business as usual. Officials were announcing the arrival of Abdul Rashid, a leader of the Jamiat Ulema-Islam party. That's when this happened.
Today, during a Jamiat Ulema-Islam rally, there was a blast. Many of our colleagues have been martyred, many injured. Personally, I am safe, but my colleagues have suffered heavy losses.
The scenes were straight out of a doomsday. The attack was carried out by a suicide bomber. He was present at the rally and, in fact, was close to the stage where several senior party leaders were sitting. That's when he detonated his explosive vest. Soon there was dust and smoke all around. People were knocked to the ground. Several lay there soaked in their own blood. Police rushed to rescue the injured.
I am a shopkeeper, and I was also present at the rally with my son who got injured. We lost our loved ones, so many martyred in the incident. I demand that the government investigate this, because this was a brutal act. Now we don't know what will happen in the future.
This attack targeted the Jamiat Ulema-Islam Fazl. It's led by the Islamic cleric Maulana Fazlur Rahman. The JUIF is an ally of the coalition government in Pakistan. The event was to mobilize supporters ahead of the polls, but it turned into one of Pakistan's worst attacks in a decade. The party's local chief was among the dead. Two of its main leaders were also on stage, but they escaped unharmed. JUIF says this attack was an attempt to remove it from the field, but warned that such tactics wouldn't work. The bombing has drawn nationwide condemnation. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif slammed the attack. He also spoke to the JUIF Supremo over the phone, promising strict punishment for those behind the attack. Fazlur Rahman, meanwhile, called for a high-level inquiry. The location of the attack was Pakistan's Bajaur district, once a stronghold of the Tehreek-e-Taliban. But even they have distanced themselves from the attack. The TTP said such crimes cannot be justified in any way. Also, the JUIF Supremo, Maulana Fazlur Rahman, is a pro-Taliban cleric. So who exactly was behind the attack? It was the Islamic State. They have often accused the JUIF of hypocrisy. They slammed them for being an Islamic political party that supports secular governments. Last year, it was behind attacks on the party. So this could be the work of the ISIS-K. But no group has yet claimed responsibility, so nothing is certain for now. Violence during election season is not abnormal for Pakistan, but this attack couldn't have come at a worse time. The country is hosting the Chinese Vice Premier, He Lifeng. He is in Islamabad right now. Lifeng is in Pakistan to mark a decade of the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a sprawling package under which Beijing invested billions of dollars in Pakistan. But this suicide blast now seems to have cast a shadow over that.